Your adult child just called. Maybe it was a phone call you half expected. Maybe it came out of nowhere. But the words were the same. Mom, Dad, I need to come home for a while. And your heart said yes before your brain even had a chance to think. Of course it did. You're a parent. That instinct never goes away, no matter how old your child is, no matter how old you are. But here's what I want you to ask yourself right now. Honestly, did some part of you hesitate? Did some quiet voice in the back of your mind whisper, "Wait, what does this actually mean for me?" If it did, I want you to know, that voice is not selfish. That voice is wise, and today I'm going to help you listen to it. I've been a practicing psychologist for over 40 years. I have sat across from hundreds of families, wonderful, loving families, who found themselves in exactly this situation. And I can tell you without any hesitation, the arrangements that worked beautifully and the ones that fell apart had almost nothing to do with love. They had everything to do with preparation. So today, I'm giving you the 7 house rules you need to set before your adult child moves back home. Not to control them, not because you don't trust them, but because these rules are the very thing that will protect your relationship and protect you for everything that comes next. Stay with me. This one could change everything. Here's something you may not know. You are far from alone in this. According to recent data, more than 1 in 3 adults between the ages of 18 and 34 are now living with a parent. That number has been climbing steadily, pushed higher by inflation, by student debt, by the aftermath of the pandemic, by divorces, by job markets that don't look anything like they did 40 years ago. So if your adult child is asking to come home, they're not unusual. And you saying yes? That's not unusual either. It's loving. But in my 4 decades of practice, I've watched this same situation play out in 3 very different ways. The first group, and these are the families I love to hear from, sat down together before anyone moved a single box. They had honest, sometimes uncomfortable conversations. They wrote things down. They agreed on expectations. And years later, they'll tell you it brought them closer than they'd been in decades. The second group, and this is the most common, they moved their child in with the best of intentions, but they never talked about the details. They assumed everyone understood. They let things slide to keep the peace. And slowly, quietly, resentment crept in. Not dramatic blow-ups, just a slow erosion. Tension at dinner, sleepless nights, the feeling of being a stranger in your own home. The third group, and these are the hardest cases I've worked with, they said yes, without any boundaries at all. And eventually, the living arrangement didn't just strain the relationship. It broke it. The difference between those 3 groups? Always, it came down to what happened before move-in day. Today, I'm going to make sure you're in that first group. And before we get into the rules themselves, I want to reframe something that might be sitting heavy on your heart right now. Setting rules for your adult child does not mean you love them less. It means you love them, and yourself, enough to do this right. At your stage of life, certain things are not negotiable. Your health, your financial security, your peace of mind. A boundary is not a wall between you and your child. It is the foundation that makes the relationship possible. Now, let's talk about the 7 rules. Rule number 1, and I cannot stress this enough. Define the timeline before anyone unpacks a single bag. This is the rule most parents skip entirely because it feels harsh. It feels like you're already planning to kick your child out before they've even arrived. But here's what I know from experience. When there is no end date, there is no urgency. And when there is no urgency, temporary becomes permanent. I worked with a woman, I'll call her Patricia, who let her son move back in after his divorce. He was devastated. She wanted to help. They never talked about a timeline because it felt cruel in the moment. 7 years later, he was still there. She was 74, in declining health, and felt completely trapped. She told me, "I was so afraid of hurting his feelings that I ended up destroying both of our lives." Here's the psychological reality. Human beings need structure and deadlines to make changes. Without a clear endpoint, your child has no reason to push through the discomfort of rebuilding. They're comfortable. You're providing for them. Why would anything change? The conversation doesn't have to be cold. It can be loving and direct at the same time. Try something like this. We are so glad we can help you through this. We want you here. And because we want this to work for both of us, let's agree on what success looks like and when we'll know you're ready for the next step. Set a specific date, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. Or set a milestone, when you have a stable income, when you've saved a certain amount, when the custody arrangement is settled. Whatever makes sense for your child's situation. And then, and this is critical, do a check-in every 3 months. Not as a test, but as a team. How is the progress going? Does the timeline need to be adjusted? Is everyone still on the same page? A clear timeline protects your child from complacency. It protects you from feeling trapped. And it gives the whole arrangement a sense of forward momentum instead of stagnation. Let me ask you something personal. Do you have enough money saved to fully support another adult for the next several years? Even if the answer is technically yes, should you? And more importantly, is that actually what you want? Rule number 2 is this. Every financial expectation must be spoken clearly and written down before your child moves in. There are 3 basic models I've seen work well. The first is a direct rent contribution. Your child pays a set amount each month, below market rate but real money. The second is a cost-sharing model. They cover certain household bills, groceries, or utilities. The third, especially if they're unemployed, is a labor-based contribution, a clear and specific list of household responsibilities that stand in for financial payment. Any of these can work. What never works is silence. When you say nothing, your child, consciously or not, assumes you will cover everything. And honestly, can you blame them? You've been taking care of them for decades. Old patterns are powerful. But here's what silence does to you. It breeds resentment. Every grocery bill you pay alone, every utility that climbs higher, every month you dip into savings, it adds up. And it adds up emotionally just as much as financially. At 60 plus, you do not have the luxury of a 30-year earning runway to recover from financial strain. Your retirement savings are not a safety net for your adult child. They are the foundation of your security and dignity in the years ahead. So write it down. Yes, actually put it on paper. Both of you sign it. I know that might feel formal or even distrustful, but I promise you it is the opposite. A written agreement says, we respect each other enough to be honest, and we care enough about this relationship to protect it. Here's a script to open that conversation. I want you here, and I want this to work long-term. The only way we can do that without it creating tension between us is if we're clear about finances from day one. Can we sit down and figure out what your contribution looks like? That's not a hard conversation. That's a loving one. Here's something that surprises a lot of parents when they finally admit it out loud. When your adult child moves back in, it can start to feel like your home is no longer yours. Not because they're being malicious. Not because they mean any harm. But because privacy, real, reliable privacy, is something most of us only appreciate when we no longer have it. Rule number 3. Your space is still your space, and that must be defined from the beginning. This means which rooms are shared and which are not. It means your bedroom door is a boundary that does not get crossed without knocking. It means if you have a home office, a reading room, a garden that is your sanctuary, those spaces are yours. Discuss what common space looks like. The kitchen, the living room, how do you navigate those shared areas in a way that doesn't constantly put you on top of each other? If your child wants to have friends over, a partner visit, an overnight guest, that requires a conversation. Not permission like they're a teenager again, but a simple, respectful heads up. Because it's your home. And here is the deeper psychological reason this matters so much. Privacy is not a luxury for people in their 60s and beyond. It is directly tied to stress levels, sleep quality, blood pressure, and overall well-being. When you lose your private space, your nervous system feels it, even if you tell yourself you don't mind. You are allowed to mind. In fact, I'm giving you professional permission right now. You are allowed to protect your peace. I want to tell you about the single most common sentence I hear from parents whose adult children have moved back home. Ready? I just assumed they'd know to do it. The dishes, the laundry, taking out the trash, mowing the lawn, making dinner. The assumption that your adult child will simply notice what needs to be done and do it is one of the most reliable sources of quiet rage in multi-generational households. And I use the word rage not lightly. I've sat with 68-year-old women who were vibrating with fury about dishes left in the sink, not because they're petty, but because those dishes represent 6 months of invisible labor that was never acknowledged. Rule number 4. Create a clear, specific division of household responsibilities before your child moves in one single item of furniture. Not a general understanding. Not a vague sense that everyone will pitch in. A list. Posted on the refrigerator if necessary. With names next to tasks. If your child is unemployed and not contributing financially, household contributions become even more important, both practically and psychologically. It gives them a sense of purpose and dignity. It keeps them from slipping into passivity. It tells them, you are a contributing member of this household, not a guest being waited on. And if you're the one who ends up doing everything, you will build resentment faster than you can imagine. And the relationship will pay the price. This is the rule I wish I could go back and tell every parent I've ever worked with, early, before the damage was done. When your adult child is going through something difficult, a divorce, a job loss, a health scare, a broken heart, your instinct is to absorb their pain, to take it on, to be available every hour of every day. And I want you to know that instinct comes from a beautiful place. It really does. But it can quietly destroy you. Rule number 5. You are their parent. You are not their therapist, their emotional punching bag, or their 24-hour crisis line. Over the years, I've watched loving parents become completely consumed by their adult child's emotional world. They stop sleeping. They stop seeing friends. They lose the thread of their own lives because they are so entirely focused on holding their child together. Here's the hard truth. When a parent solves every problem and absorbs every emotion, the adult child does not grow. They don't build the coping skills they need. And the parent, the person who has already given 30 or 40 years of active parenting, begins to deteriorate quietly, physically, and emotionally. Here's what healthy emotional engagement looks like. You can listen. You can be present. You can express love and support, but with limits. When the conversation becomes circular, when you're having the same discussion at 2 a.m. for the 5th week in a row, it is not unkind to say, I love you, and I think what you're carrying is something that needs more than I can offer. I want you to talk to someone who can really help you. Watch for these warning signs in yourself. You're losing sleep over your child's problems. You've stopped making plans of your own. You feel anxious and depleted most of the time. You can't remember the last time you thought about something other than what your child is going through. Those are signals, and they are telling you that a boundary has been crossed, even if you crossed it willingly, with love. Protecting your own emotional health is not abandonment. It is wisdom. And frankly, it's the only way you can stay a steady, loving presence for your child long term. Let's be honest about something. You've spent the last decade, maybe more, with your home exactly the way you like it. Your routines, your schedule, your noise level, your dinner time, your television programs, your bedtime, your life. And now someone with a completely different generation of habits, different sleep schedule, different music, different ideas about what clean kitchen means, is moving into that life. Rule number 6 is about something I call mutual lifestyle respect. And the key word there is mutual. This means you sit down before move-in day and talk through the basics. What time does quiet time begin in this house? Are there regular shared meals, or does everyone fend for themselves? What's the expectation around noise, especially late at night or early in the morning? What does keeping common areas tidy actually mean to each of you? Now here's what this rule does not mean. It does not mean you micromanage your adult child's personal life. What they eat, who they call, what they do with their free time, how they choose to spend their money, that is their business. You respect the person they've become, even when you might have opinions about their choices. In return, they respect that this is your home. They don't blast music at 11 p.m. They don't leave their friends in your living room until 3 in the morning. They don't make you feel like a guest in the house you've lived in for 30 years. 2 generations, living together, each of you treating the other like a full adult. That's the goal, and it only happens when you say it out loud before it becomes a problem. This is the conversation most parents resist the hardest. And I understand why. When your child first arrives, it feels unkind, even premature, to talk about what happens if things go wrong. But here's the psychological reality. The best time to plan for a difficult situation is before emotions are involved. The worst time is in the middle of a conflict when everyone is hurt and defensive. Rule number 7. Have the what-if conversation before anyone moves in. What if the agreed timeline passes and your child isn't ready to leave and isn't making progress toward leaving? What if a specific rule is broken repeatedly, despite multiple conversations? What if your situation changes, your health declines, you need more help yourself, or you simply realize this isn't working for your well-being? These are not pessimistic questions. They are responsible ones, and going through them together, calmly, in advance, actually strengthens trust rather than damaging it. Here's how to frame it. I want us to plan for success. And part of planning for success is knowing what we do if things get complicated. It's not about assuming the worst. It's about being honest with each other so that nothing ever catches us off guard. Write down what the agreed responses look like. What is the process if a rule is consistently violated? What's the communication plan if the timeline needs to be extended or ended earlier? If you need your space back for any reason, how much notice will you give, and what support will you offer to help your child transition? Couples who plan for hard conversations don't do so because they expect things to fall apart. They do it because they respect each other enough to be prepared. The same applies here. Before I close, I want to give you a concrete tool you can use this week. Before your adult child moves a single item into your home, I want you to schedule what I call a family meeting. Not a lecture, not a negotiation. A genuine sit-down between adults who care about each other. Set a time when no one is rushed or stressed. Have coffee, sit at the kitchen table, and work through 5 questions together. 1. What is the goal of this arrangement, and how will we know when it's been achieved? 2. What does each person need in order to feel comfortable and respected in this home? 3. What will our financial arrangement look like, in specific terms? 4. How will we handle disagreements or concerns when they come up, before they become bigger problems? 5. What does the transition out look like, and when do we expect it? Write the answers down. Both of you keep a copy. You can revisit it at your 3-month check-ins. This meeting takes maybe an hour, but it can save you years of tension and heartbreak. It is, without question, one of the most valuable hours you will ever invest in your relationship with your child. Let me leave you with this. You have spent a lifetime, decades, putting your family first. Getting up early. Staying up late. Sacrificing things you wanted so that the people you loved could have what they needed. That chapter was beautiful, and it was enough. This next chapter, your chapter, belongs to you. Saying yes to your adult child does not mean giving up everything you've built. It doesn't mean surrendering your space, your finances, your peace, your identity, or your health. It means loving them and loving yourself. At the same time, without apology. The 7 rules we talked about today aren't about control. They're not about distrust. They're about creating a structure that gives this arrangement the best possible chance of bringing you closer, rather than pulling you apart. Let me say them one more time simply. Rule 1. Define a clear, honest timeline. Rule 2. Put financial expectations in writing. Rule 3. Protect your personal space. Rule 4. Share household responsibilities specifically. Rule 5. Be their parent, not their therapist. Rule 6. Establish mutual lifestyle respect. Rule 7. Have the exit plan conversation now, not later. And if you do nothing else after watching this video, schedule that family meeting. This week. Before anything else happens. You've spent 40, 50, 60 years earning the life you have now. Be brave enough to protect it. I'll see you in the next video.